thank you all for joining tonight. I especially want to thank everyone in these very strange times who are going to school and working on their computers and then to choose to do something social on their computers in the evening means a lot, especially for an independent bookstore. For those of you who are not local to the Boston area, Belmont Books is an independent bookstore outside of Cambridge. And we have a pretty robust events calendar because everything is so virtual. So we hope that you will join us for more events. We have one tomorrow, which is kind of like a beach reading with Mary, I think it's Mary Alice Monroe, and conversation with Nancy Thayer. That'll be pretty fun. And then next week, I think Tuesday, we have an event which is a partnership with Random House and several other indies, especially in this area. The In the Heights virtual book launch. So Lin-Manuel Miranda will be in conversation with actress America Ferrera to talk about the In the Heights movie. You can get tickets through Eventbrite and on our site. I believe the cost of the book is your ticket. So instead of a free event, you do pay for the book. And then we also have a yoga slash demo event with Laura Stanton on Tuesday before the In the Heights event. So, come do yoga, relax yourself, and then, maybe for In the Heights, pour yourself a glass of wine and settle in at 8 for that. If you've never attended a virtual event with us, I will introduce these wonderful writers. I will disappear and fade away into the background for about 45 minutes and then come back for a Q&A. If you do have questions for Nekesa and Denny, there is a little button at the bottom of your screen that looks like 2 speech bubbles. It says Q&A. You can submit your questions through there, and it just helps keep track of everything so nothing gets lost in the chat. So if you have any questions at any time, you can submit them through there and we will get to them at the end. So let us move on. I'm going to introduce Denny first because she is our wonderful in conversation partner. And I will say, if you missed Denny's event with us for her, is your debut, Denny?
Yes,
Wild Women in the Blues?
also a debut.
With Julie Carrick Dalton, we recorded that event and it's up on our YouTube channel. So you can hear Denny talk specifically about her historical fiction, Wild Women in the Blues. It was very good as someone who watched it. So I highly recommend going through and watching it. Denny S. Bryce is an award-winning author and 3-time RWA Golden Heart finalist, including twice for Wild Women and the Blues. In addition to writing for NPR Books and Frolic Media, the former professional dancer is a public relations professional who has spent over 2 decades running her own marketing and event management firm, a member of the Historical Novel Society, Women's Fiction Writers Association, and Novelists, Inc. She is a frequent speaker at author events. Originally from Chicago, she now lives in Savannah, Georgia. Also, if any of you like reading book reviews and finding out what to read next, I highly recommend Denny's reviews on NPR. I trust everything she reviews and enjoys. So big fan here. And if you need more books to read, definitely read those. But we are here to celebrate Nekesa's debut novel, Dead Dead Girls. Nekesa Afia is a Canadian millennial who is doing her best, as all millennials are, which I am also one. When she isn't writing, she's either sewing, swing dancing, or actively trying to pet every dog she sees. Dead Dead Girls is her debut novel, and at the store we have signed book plates from Nekesa. So if you didn't order one through Eventbrite when you registered, you can still order one through Belmont Books, and you will get a signed book plate along with your copy of Dead Dead Girls. So I will turn it over to Denny and Nekesa, and I will be back in a little later.
Thank you so much. And
thank you.
Welcome, everybody. This is very exciting for me in particular because Nekesa's book, Dead Dead Girls, takes place in the 1920s, as does my debut album. And she and I we haven't met in person, which is amazing, but we've spent a lot of time together nonetheless. And I am so thrilled to talk about her book today, or have her talk about her book today. So I'm going to start by just saying, Nekesa, please just share with all of us tell us about your book. And I want to hear about, well, let's just start with that question. I don't want to bombard you with questions.
Okay, totally valid. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. So Dead Dead Girls, here it is again. It's my debut novel. And I've been pitching it as a novel, a Prohibition era mystery, wherein a tiny, tired lesbian is extorted into solving crime. I wrote it because I really love crime. Who doesn't? I fall asleep to true crime podcasts. I've been like reading Nancy Drew since I was like 13. Anything that there's a mystery in, I like really like. So I decided to write a mystery, and I picked them because obviously, if we're gonna do like Prohibition era, actually, I guess Denny, you might disagree with this, but if we're gonna do Prohibition era, we're gonna set it in Harlem because of the Harlem Renaissance and all of the Black culture.
Yeah.
But you might have thoughts on that. I totally understand. And yeah, so the case is based off of Jack the Ripper, which remains unsolved. But on this book, there's a good old resolution in this book, which we like.
Resolutions are very good. You mentioned that you like crime because this is what we call a mystery series. Your crime fighters in this story, your lead and her group of supporting detectives, if you will, are going to begin this fabulous journey and then go on. You know, I'm wishing you 20, 30, 40 books in the series. You're like, okay, wait a minute now, let's get through one. But tell me, let's start. You mentioned Harlem, you mentioned the arts and the things that were happening there. I love the Harlem Renaissance. I'm also a big fan of the Chicago Black Renaissance. But I want to ask you specifically, tell me how you shaped your main character. What were the important things about her that you wanted to make sure you delivered on the page, but also inspired you to want to write a series with her in the lead?
So my main character is named Louise Lloyd, and I love her so much. She is a tiny Spitfire. And above all, I just really wanted to make a character who was human and someone who people could relate to. Because like I know that like if I'm reading a book and then like the main character is absolutely perfect and everyone loves her and men are falling for her and women want to be her best friend and she's so flawless, she can fly a plane and drive a car and shoot a gun and dance and she's so sexy, like everyone wants her, like that's not interesting to me just because like they're already perfect. So like they have no flaws, like are on the page, and like I don't have to be along with you to solve that mystery because, well, I can go make a cup of tea. You're fine. You've got this. But Lou is basically the opposite. She is a mess. She is lazy. She is she just likes like three things and that's it. And like she just wants to do those three things constantly, but like her life keeps getting in the way. So I thought that'd be kind of endearing to like have a protagonist who doesn't really want to solve crime but will anyway. And I really wanted to like make someone who like reminded me of like my mom and my sisters and like my sister. I have one sister, and like, all of my friends.
Yeah.
Like just like the complex woman you're like just surrounded by constantly. Like that's what I wanted.
And did you want to give her, you know, in so many mysteries that lead character has some sort of special skill, something that is just a part of their makeup. Did you bestow any of those types of traits on your main character?
Yeah, Lou can dance and she can dance really well, but that's it.
Okay. Okay, but I know that you're a swing dancer. And you enjoy that. And as I mentioned about, well, when I talk about Wild Women in the Blues, my main character is also a dancer. And my dance background is I don't think I probably took a swing class, but that's more 40s. Isn't swing more 40s? Tell me a little bit about that aspect of.
Yes.
Go. Yeah.
So so swing is kind of built on like, well, the one I do, Lindy Hop, is actually definitely like
Okay.
built on like 3 different like dances. So there's East Coast, West Coast, and Lindy Hop, and I do Lindy Hop because that's the first thing that came up when I Googled it. Swing dance classes. Lindy Hop, that sounds good. So it's based off of 3 different styles: Charleston, 6 count, and 8 count styles. And so like the Charleston dig starts in the 20s. And then there are also like the classic dances like the waltz and the foxtrot and the Baltimore and the tango.
Right.
So like all of those were like building blocks. And then the 6 count and the 8 count came later. And then yes, swing did really have its heyday in the 1940s. I was actually just watching the Great British Sewing Bee, and they had 40s week this week, and they had to make a pair of like wide leg pants that you wear swing dancing. I was like, yes.
Oh,
that's
okay.
it.
Yeah, that makes
Yes.
sense. And in fact, on Instagram recently, I just saw a old piece of film of 2 Lindy Hoppers who supposedly originated it, and I saved it. I'll have to shoot you a link so you can take a look at it, because that's a very vigorous dance. But let's get back to your book. The other thing about mysteries and books that are designed to be a series, what is the difference when you're looking at preparing or developing that story in that book? What's the difference between writing a series and writing a standalone, especially in the crime genre, from your perspective? What were the things that you really wanted to dig into?
I'm having fun figuring that out right now. So
yeah.
So I think that like, especially for like a mystery novel, it's important that the mystery gets resolved. Like if the mystery like keeps going over a series of books, I will get bored. I'm chaotically ADHD. I will get bored. So like I have to make sure that like there's a resolution in the book, and then there's something that will like lead to the next book and the next book.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to do that in terms of characters. So I'm starting Lou as an amateur because I wanted to have her to be able to grow. She's got like her friends around her, and she like lives in a like boarding house, but then in book 2 it's different, and then in book 3 it'll be different again, and then book 4 it'll be different again. Still change.
Yeah.
So I think it's just like I'm trying to treat Lou like as a real person, which she totally is. Please don't tell me she's not real. And
yes,
I
understand that. I understand, believe me. Let's go back and talk about the 1920s. One of the things that I've been experiencing with my novel has been something that you touch upon in your author's note. In talking about the 1920s, there's always, at least from my perspective, there's always been this sort of Great Gatsby-esque thing that is a part of the initial reaction response to the 1920s. And the opportunity to share a perspective from the African American community is something that I've been very excited about. And also, I feel that some of the letters, or many of the letters that I'm receiving, are really excited about having this other perspective that they hadn't been exposed to previously. So in presenting or writing books where your lead characters are African Americans in the 1920s, what were some of the things that you wanted to make sure you got across in terms of environment, atmosphere, time period?
Yeah, so I think that's really important. So it's really important, especially because like when I like watch like period pieces, or like when I like read them, some the cast will like usually mostly be like entirely white, and it's like, but Black people existed. We didn't just start existing in the 1990s when Fresh Prince started to air.
Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Yeah, great show, but like we existed way longer than
I'm going to take you back a little further than that. I think what was my show that I can't think of it right now, but there were a couple on the WB, or not the W5.
Yeah, and we have like a BET. So I think it's because of like the massive success of books like The Great Gatsby and like anything from Hemingway, like just books that were like written in that time period, and they're like about like rich white people having fun, and like that's kind of what people thought the 20s were like, because that's what survived. Like that's the text that we're surviving. So I think it's really important to like get a different perspective, just because that's not the truth.
Well, that's not the whole story.
Yeah, it's not the whole
And
story.
that's
Yeah,
what's really important
I
to
guess
share. It's a bigger,
Fitzgerald's
broader.
truth. Fitzgerald has his truth, and I have my other truth. Fitzgerald is also a plagiarist, so there is that. So I just think that like getting a different like viewpoint on the 1920s, someone who doesn't have the type of money, who doesn't have the type of status or wealth, the type of person who like has to really work to survive in that world, that was really important to me. And
And I also liked the idea of sharing, or not just the idea of really touching on the fact that people, yes, there were people who were workers who had jobs and responsibilities and challenges, social injustice, whatever, but they were also people who lived their lives with joy. Even in a mystery, there's and murder and crime, there's fun, there's laughter, there's relationships that can be relied upon. So tell me, let's dig into the 1920s. You made a little comment there about the Harlem Renaissance and, you know, Chicago Black Renaissance. I got to stand up for my Chicago.
Yeah.
Because Chicago, always the second city-itis is what Chicago has suffered from. There's a fabulous theater in Chicago called Second City because of the fact that, well, actually it's a comedy club, and I hope it's still there because I'm dating myself if it's not. But in the 20s and 30s, the people who were leading the charge in the Renaissance in New York were definitely people who traveled from major metropolitan area from one to the other. So the likes of the Langston Hughes and the Richard Wrights and the Zora Neale Hurstons, they were not only sticking around 125th Street in New York. I used to live in New York, so they were traveling. They got to Chicago quite often. So why the 1920s? What inspired you to pick that time period?
So it's just been a period that I've been fascinated in for like as long as I can remember. So specifically, right before I started writing this novel, I was in my senior year of university. Yes, I'm dating myself. Sorry. And we were studying history. I was doing this history course, and we were studying like the 1920s and like how it was only good for like straight white men, and like even further back, so like the 1800s too. And we just talked about like London and New York and Canada, like all of those time periods. And I just thought it was so like thrilling to be a part of the 1920s. Like, sure, there was just a war and the KKK is back and people are super racist and women can't even vote. But there's also like all this writing and all this art and like, of course, music and dance styles that were coming out of it. And I just think that like the birth of all of that, like all of everything creative that's come out of like that like specific time period, like right after war, where an entire generation is just like shell-shocked and can't believe what just happened. It was really like a decade of like growth and art and like freedom, and it came right before the economy crashed, and we had to go back to just like hunkering down and like going to work every day. But like there's just so much space for people to have fun and to create, and that's something that really drew me to it. And also the prohibition was a huge flop, and I was really interested in it. It was a huge flop.
Prohibition definitely was a flop, but at the same time it just, it's sort of like those things where you say it's a conversion of choices and options and people and war, and then out of that comes this fascinating time period where people were just kicking up their heels in a number of different ways, and it did not miss any community. It was happening everywhere, and that's what I love about the 1920s is that I have a closer connection, I might say, because my grandmother came to this country from Jamaica in 1923. And so my connection to her, because we were very close, and when I was a little girl, she had all of this stuff on the walls with the photos of her in these crazy cars and all of these fancy clothes. And I was like, what was happening during that time period? What are you doing? old lady, what were you up to back in the day? So I had that opportunity. And so that's my connection. I really personalized my love affair with the 1920s.
Yeah.
I have a question over here that I'm looking at that I'm just going to have to ask you. Someone wants to hear you rant about Fitzgerald. What is that about?
Okay, it's not just like, it's not.
Well, I could just tell it's one of those questions that just popped, it caught my eye.
Okay, no, it's not really a rant. I just have a lot of feelings about the 1920s and how like just men did so much stuff, and then like the women who are like doing stuff also weren't credited for it, you know?
Yeah.
And I just think that Fitzgerald wasn't that good of a writer, and he plagiarized from his wife a lot. And yeah, that's it.
That's the whole thing.
Yeah, that's the whole thing now that I think about it. I mean, I totally die for The Great Gatsby. I love that book, but there is that.
Well, you know, writing and writers over the time period, you know, from that decade, every decade has a different take on how stories are told and how stories are written. And that's another aspect of research, and because now I'm going to segue into us talking about research and that whole process. How the discoveries that are, yes, discoveries that help us build story and enhance and complicate characters and situations, but also just, you know, getting lost in the rabbit hole and just finding fun things. So tell me a little bit first about your process. How did you go about researching the time period?
Okay, so in Toronto, we're super lucky to have a huge reference library. So I go a lot. I was also writing an essay about the Prohibition era for that history class I was in.
Oh, okay.
So I just go to the stacks and I'd look things up. But I did learn that like a lot of the research I needed was like highly specialized. So it's like, what would my character wear to work? What would she wear dancing? Those are two different things. What would she eat for breakfast? Nothing. Where would she work? What would she do? Like, where would she spend her free time? Dancing. Where would she go for fun? It's all like the little things that you don't really think make up like a life, but they do. And like having to translate that from like 2016 when I started writing this novel to back in the 1926 was really fun and also really challenging. I also had to buy a whole book on poison and how poison worked in the 20th century, so that was good. I had to order that online.
Those fine quality books that help us stay on the FBI list. No, I really do hear you when you talk about the fine details of the day-to-day lives of characters and how that really adds to, I think, the reader experience. Because, you know, from what they wear, where they buy it, how, you know, my main character was very much a seamstress, and I also noticed that you are a huge fan of the sewing machine and dress patterns, and believe it or not, I used to spend a lot of time doing that, but then I said hecky no because I just said hecky no. But my mother was, and grandmother was very much involved. That's how, when I saw my first Singer sewing machine, the one from 1920s, because she had it in the house, where your feet are on the bottom on the pedal and have to operate that and do this. I don't know if you, with the crank. Okay.
Yeah.
So going way back too far in time. But tell me about your passion for again, how that, I want to talk more about research, but those different things, just as something as simple as dress patterns, or how people clothe themselves in fabrics, and that's an authentic thing, you know, that you want to keep track of.
Yeah, so getting the clothing right specifically was like a huge thing for me, because like I make clothes. I made this top. It's from a deckstock 1920s pattern, actually. Thank you. It buttons at the back. It's very cute.
Yeah, no, it looks very great.
yeah, so I just getting the clothes right is really important because like every decade has its own sense of style. And like every decade, like if you get one thing wrong, then you're in the wrong decade. And there are some like shows like Bridgerton, which I was just talking about today, and The Great, which really do embrace their like historical inaccuracy with like their clothes and their music and everything, but that's not the vibe I was going for. I want everything very historically accurate. So I'm like, so I'd like have to, yeah, right? So like
right, exactly, because there are bridges that you can play around with. Some of my favorite historical TV shows, if you will, Downton Abbey. Downton Abbey's clothing are very, very authentic. I went to their, they were doing a touring show, and I went to the one in New York, and I think I went to one in DC, just so I could look at those clothes and just get a feeling of that time period. But clothing is important, but also the other element that I think is very important is music. How can you put sound on the page? So tell me about your process with the music of the time period and how that helped your story atmosphere.
Well, first, of course, I had to curate a Spotify list. That's number one always. We're going to start a Spotify list and hope everything works out. It's not really like saying, oh, this song was playing in the background, but like explain, like trying to like show the singer singing and like the trumpets trumpeting and the flutes. I'm not a very musical person, which is very odd for me. But like it's just trying to like go like describe like how that feels, especially like when you're on the dance floor, which is very important to me because I'm a dancer. Like I have friends who are in bands. We dance to like big bands or like every like World Lindy Hop Day. So like it's just like getting that feeling right, and like that's a bit of a cop-out answer, but like it really is all about the feelings and like taking the feelings and then like putting them onto the page type thing.
Yes, absolutely. No, I totally hear you, because that sound, I paid a lot of attention to lyrics from the time period, because I felt that the lyrics gave me insight into, frankly, the psyche of the people, because these songs were written during that time period and performed during that time period. And the blues singers were so over the top and fascinating and fascinated by what they were singing about. And so digging in at that level really also helped. But honestly, the fact that I used to pretend to sing and have that being on stage was a thing I always wanted to explore, the feelings and what you notice when you're performing. So you were talking about, you do a lot of, dancing with live huge orchestras for the time period in the music. So that was a way of getting closer to those feelings and connecting your audience or your readers that way. Tell me about your Spotify list real fast. What's your favorite tune that you discovered during this whole process?
Okay, so there are actually two Spotify playlists. And if you go onto my website, nekesafia.com/books, they're both in my reader's guide for this book. There's one modern one that is Louise and her girlfriend Rosa Maria's pre-gaming playlist, which I put together, and I have a ball listening to it like every day now. But there's also a historically accurate one. And I think I've got Putting on the Ritz on that one, which I really like.
Okay.
5'2", positively, absolutely. There are so many like good like songs. Like I Want to Be Loved by You, that one that Marilyn sung in Some Like It Hot.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I have a Spotify list from Wild Women in the Blues, and the songs are frankly songs that are mentioned or performed in the book, most of them. And that was fun because I had an opportunity to really, put that whole Spotify, here's the listening track, and it follows where it appears in the book. So that was fun. Now, Tell me the most surprising thing you found from your research. When you were digging in, what one thing did you go, wow?
How easy it was to just disappear back then.
Mhm.
And it was so easy to disappear back then. People could just leave and that was it. You'd never see them again.
Yeah.
And I love that so much.
That's an interesting reaction. Okay. So if you're gone, you just boom, just go.
Yeah, don't find me. I'm busy.
Now, well, yes, it's actually, I was watching an old TV show recently, because that's what I do. I watch TV shows I don't have to really think about because they've been on the air for 1,000 years. But really noticing how communication has evolved even in the last 25 years. It's amazing how much more in each other's business we are because of things like social media and what have you. But back then, you could walk out of the house and just become somebody else 3 states away.
Yeah.
And never know.
Yeah. And crime solving was also way harder back then because we don't have the little luxuries we have now, like blood DNA. We have fingerprinting, but like that's it.
Right.
So
right.
like we don't have like cameras on every corner. We don't have cameras on our phone all the time. So basically, if you wanted to commit a crime like in the 1920s too, it's super easy. You just kill someone, just stab them, and as long as no one saw you, you're golden, which is really scary to think about. And like even up until like the 1970s, there were like so many people just killing other people because it's just totally possible.
That crime definitely had barriers, I would say, and some of that had to do with technology, of course. I think that that's one other thing that fascinates readers today about reading historical fiction and crime, because of those differences, and then the brain power that your main character and her or his cohorts have to have in order to solve the crime. That's part of the experience of reading mysteries. Who are you had mentioned rather quickly some of your favorite mystery writers, but who comes to mind if you were to recommend a couple that are top of mind?
Oh my goodness, I'd have to check my phone because I have like my list of books I've read. For more contemporary cozy writers, there's Mia P. Manansala, Olivia Black, The Other Me by Sarah H. Chang is so good. I think about that book daily. It's not really like a mystery, it's more like a thriller thing, so it's really good. For something more like in the past contemporary, I'm totally like a Raymond Chandler guy. Like I love The Big Sleep. I'm like thinking about rereading it. It's a good book. I also love things like Rebecca. Like so the list goes on. But I'm also like kind of like really picky about like the mysteries I'll read. It's
well, so one of my favorite, now I don't read a lot of mysteries, but I'll tell you one of the classic, in my mind, it's a mystery, but it's a long series, 47, maybe 55 books by now. It's by J.D. Robb, Nora Roberts' other persona. And what I love about what she's done with that series is, well, first, it's too many books. It's just, you go back and say, oh, I think I'm gonna read this series. It's 45, 50 books. But what I've enjoyed is how that character, that central character, Eve, I can't remember Eve's last name. I remember her husband's name, Rourke. But anyway, that it has an underlining romance, except I don't consider, it's primarily mystery crime solving and a slightly futuristic. But creating that multi-layered character that just keeps the reader wanting to come back. Are you confident with that, or are you like, oh my God? Because it's second book-itis. Let's talk about, I'm a debut author. Nekesa is a debut author, but we're also right in the midst of promoting and being very excited about our first book, but we also have a second book due.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
right now, where's the book?
Well, book 2 is harder than book 1. And I think that's specifically because I had all the time in the world to like write and revise and then write and revise book 1. But for book 2, it was like, okay, it's due February 1st, 2021. Let's get it in. I went, okay, I can definitely write a novel in that time. So I didn't have like the research time I would like. I didn't have the like, well, I do like to procrastinate with research, and that's like a major thing, but like I didn't like have the writing time I'd like. So I am pretty nervous about it. We'll see what my editor says.
Well, that's why they're there.
Yeah.
That's my philosophy.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, help me. But yeah, I totally understand every aspect of every word you just spoke, because I'm definitely in that same boat right now, where I have a book due and getting that ready. But tell me about our debut author experience. What surprised you? What was excellent? And what was like, oh my God?
So like the Friday, I think, or the Friday before. Well, sometime very close to when my book came out, I was reviewed in the New York Times, and I got a great review. And they called my book a terrific series opener. That was just incredible.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I'm not going to do anything else today. I'm just going to scream about this review.
Okay.
It's just been like really wild to have people relate to like these characters I made up, to have them like root for her, and like to have them like really love her. My dad read it, and he was like texting me updates.
That's lovely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
just,
how are the reader letters? Are you starting to get in the reader letters?
Not really. I love reader letters. I've not gotten any yet.
It takes a month. It takes a good month.
Yeah.
You know, you've only been out, what, 2 weeks since June?
A week. Yeah.
A week?
Yeah. I came out last week.
A week ago yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it'll take them a little bit longer for the letters to start coming. And that is really very much something that is very exciting, is that has surprised me. And I've just been humbled and honored to get these letters where folks are just, you know, really insightful and questions and things like that. So that's a very lovely aspect of it. So I think we've talked about, I want to go back and have you tell us a little bit more about your story. You talk about crime, you know, there's a crime that's committed, of course. And the hard thing about talking about mysteries is that it's a mystery. and that's part of the thing. You know, so how much can you really say? You know, there are these characters and they are going to tackle this issue or this crime. So, but what other elements? We've talked about her dancing. We've talked about you know, her lifestyle and getting the clothes right and things like that. But how about, what are some of the more important relationships for this main character that you really enjoy writing?
Oh yeah, okay. So Lou has a girlfriend. They live across the hall from each other in like their boarding house. And sometimes they like sneak across the hall and sleep with each other. It's very cute. And I love them very much. Her name is Rosa Maria. And like she wants to be like a writer, like a reporter, and she like works at a newspaper. And
what
like
newspaper, may I ask?
The Tribune, but not like the real Tribune, the fake Tribune that I stole.
The fake Tribune. Yeah. I was thinking, well, that time period also had the Amsterdam News. So in New York. So
that time period had so many papers. So many papers, because that's how you're getting your news. So I just think that Rosa Maria like really balances Louis as well. She's cautious, where Lou is a little bit more energetic and ready to go. She's a little bit less stubborn, where Lou is pretty stubborn. So they're pretty much like two sides of like the same coin, and I really do like writing them. And I love them very much. And Rosa Maria has a twin brother named Raphael, who is a bartender at the club they go to. And he does nothing but get underfoot.
Troublesome young man. And you also talked about, is it really true that writing a novel is hard?
Yeah, it is hard.
That was my trick question.
Where you me to go, no, it was so easy. No, was that in my acknowledgements? I think that's in my acknowledgements, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not like the writing part isn't hard, but like the sacrifices of it are. So I've been treating writing like a job since I was like 13 years old. But like that means like sometimes I'll have to like not do events so I can write. Not like spend some time writing where I'd like prefer to be somewhere else. And like especially with this novel, it was a lot of like locking myself up in my apartment just so I can write. And like I loved every second of it, and I loved telling the story, and I can't believe that's out and that's something people can read. But it was hard, and it was like my friends would be like, oh, we're gonna go dancing. I'd be like, I can't, I have to edit the scene. Or like I'd leave dances early because all I was doing was writing on my phone. So it's a lot, it's some sacrifice, but yeah, I love it. It is hard though.
Well, yes, I've been a full-time writer because I also write other things in addition to writing books for years. And the difference, however, between technical writing, if you will, and of course novel writing, or the other thing I did was fan fiction writing, is that you're really the creating of original characters is a very challenging, I find, because I want that. My goal is to have the reader connect with those people on layers, not just a surface connection, but something deep. I'm taking a look now because I'm being reminded that it's about time for us to at least glance. Oh, this is a great question, and it was probably asked by a few minutes ago by Hank Felipe. Philip, gosh, I'm muttering here because I'm so excited that she's here.
Me too. Hi, Hank.
Hi, Hank. Oh gosh, my brain is going bad. Ryan, hi, how are you doing? And we're going to answer this one live. And how difficult is it to write about dancing and translating that into words? I'm going to also give a stab at answering this question, but I'd like you to go first.
Okay, yeah. So that was the reason why I actually started like swing dancing, so I could like kind of like get the steps right. And I was like trying to research it on the internet, and that wasn't really helping. So I just signed up for a class. I was like, okay, like if anything, I like at least know a little bit of like what I can do. But even so, people do say that my writing has like a dancing quality to it. Like it feels like melodical and like feels like people could dance to it. So it's not something I did consciously. I just kind of wrote the novel.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what I did do was like make sure that my dance scenes were all on fleek because that was important to me. So to translate dancing into words is not really like that difficult, but you have to use all of your senses. You have to use like the touch, the feel, like the sound. You have to like know exactly like where in the muscle you're using so you can like use it in a sentence. So swing dance was a very, very important, like very expensive, like research thing, but I love it. So there's that.
You do what you have to do. Now, one of the things that with me in dance, since I'd spent, so many years doing or being a dancer, I also was a choreographer, but I did not necessarily say anything like this is a dance moment. Some of the scenes were experience, backstage, performing on stage. But even when someone is not dancing, to me, movement has a center, you know, from modern dance or ballet, there's a center to it. And so to be able to have someone in a room, if they're standing perfectly still, they're still a part of the space. And that space is always in motion. So I get a little, you know, I don't know, you know, I go into my modern dance mindset for to do that. Here's another question. How much input did you have with your covers? I love both covers and they look like they need to be framed. Yeah, well, I have enough of them back here. Next time I see you, Nekesa, I want the covers right there.
Okay, the covers are
all the time.
Okay, the covers are I didn't really know like where I'd be doing like my like live stuff. So they're in a different part of the apartment, but I promise I will send you a photo. But I was actually really surprised about the like amount of input I got with my covers. So I got 2 sketches. And I chose this one with Lou in the club side-eyeing you for coming up to her table. And then a couple days later, they were like, okay, so there are 5 color options. And I'm not good with choice. I'm not good with picking things. So I had to like get my family on it. And they're like, okay, I think it's this one. And then someone else was like, oh, I think it's that one. And I went, great, I'm ignoring you guys. Thank you. And I chose the blue because I really like blue. That's it. I just really like blue. But yeah.
Okay. Well, that's very
artist, and I love her. She went all the way off, and I'm so glad.
I also participated in the process. Mine was a little bit different. We saw some different types of treatment, and coming from my background, I was for one of my many jobs in my past, I did promotion for the Art Institute of Chicago for one of the corporations that I worked at. So I was very, very involved in the art scene in Chicago when I was there. And that experience, along with working with graphic designers and marketing and advertising, I have this obsession, if you will, with the visual content. And so we went through about 3 or 4 treatments. None of them were this. None of them were this at all. And then one day, an image floated by my screen, and everybody just said, "That's it." And so it wasn't a lot. This is just one image. It's really just one thing. And I always say I have to give credit anytime I talk about this cover because I didn't do it. The cover designer is Christine Mills. She is the creative director at Kensington Publishing, and the cover illustrator is Sarah Knott. And you know, it varies, I think, from house to house, from project to project, the extent of the involvement that an author has. You know, when you're not indie publishing, when you are totally in control. So thank you, KJ, for that question, because our covers, we love them. And we're very excited about the reaction response, the covers.
Yeah, and I just love the fact that there's like an unimpressed Black girl on my cover. It's all of my dreams come true. All of them.
In the first cover. Oh yeah, and this is, I have to agree with this one too, is that we see the faces of the women on the covers. I like my gal's profile tremendously, because when I talk about this cover, I point out that I feel that's a still shot, but you can tell this person is a dancer. You know, just by the length, breadth of her shoulders. Shoulders are
the way her arm is.
neck. Yeah, you can tell. Pulling the, I don't know, for people who've taken dance classes, I'm about to go into a bad place here. I'm gonna talk about lifting the sternum, dropping the shoulders, and taking and breathing through. You know, I could go on.
Exactly.
Right. But you know what I'm talking about, because all of those all of those things are a part of just that stationary, position that make, that you can put on the page in addition to seeing visually. And when that happens, it's very exciting. It's very exciting for it to happen in a first cover, in a first book. Hopefully you'll hit that sort of gold mine with every cover. But, the real fact of the matter is still that what's on the inside of the pages is really what the readers are all about. This helps in the marketing.
Yeah.
And that's a big slice of what the other elements. Anything else about our launch? I'm looking for more questions, but I think we've answered the couple that are out there right now. But tell me about, what have I not asked you about that you just want to say, oh, now why didn't she ask me?
I don't think there is one. I think that's a very good interview. I'm just grateful to be here. It's just a pleasure.
Yeah, it is something that is surprising. I'm talking from our debut space. Both of us, for those out there who are listening to us now, both of us are in a group called the 2021 Debut Author Group. It started as a Facebook group. We have a website. We have activity on all of the social media fronts. But what its key value to me is the fact that we have been able to help each other. And because we talk in our FB group, we're like, well, what happened when you did this? Or how did that work? Who did you ask about that? That kind of support and information sharing, I have found invaluable. That's what's made, especially launching a book, even though we're on the tail end of the height of the pandemic. Nonetheless, the whole industry did an about face, frankly. So, next book, we're going to be looking at another model for how to launch a book, because we're definitely part of the pandemic strategy for getting the word out there. So how do you think that's going to affect your next book?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I think at the very least there'll be a hybrid model where it's like kind of zoomed, but then also there's a live event. And I do hope that it'll be a thing, like an event where all my friends can get together and actually celebrate. Because that's the hardest part, not having my family around me. They live 3,000 I think kilometers away from me, and it's just really hard not having my parents and my siblings with me. So yeah, I think at least we'll be able to be in person, so that'll be good.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That's the only thing I want, really.
Yeah. I hear you on that. We have another great question here. How much did we worry about a narcissist? Girl, you're using these words I can't even get out of my mouth. But we're talking about dialogue and making sure, how do we get the ear for the language and the dialogue and all of that stuff? I have my answer, but I'm asking you.
So I think one of the biggest things was to read and watch things that took place in the time. I'm a complete classic movie hoe, so any excuse to watch a classic movie is a good one. But also getting the cadence and the way they talked pretty fast then. They talked really fast then. And it's just usage of slang words, especially things that we don't have now, trying to use those in a way that would make sense, and trying to use those in a way that is correct. So
yeah. One of the things that I did, well, two things I did. First, I definitely spent a lot of time listening to the music and the lyrics and the singers of the time, because there is a cadence from lyrics and singing, especially I'm listening primarily to blues tunes, which have a different vibe altogether than anything else. I also had a fabulous book that I found written in the 1970s, but what it did, I can't, the title escapes me, but it was a series of interviews with jazz musicians from the 20s and the 30s. And just the rhythm of what they were, whatever information they were sharing was another fabulous thing. Now with the, you know, incorporating slang and making certain that I did not use a term, you know, you can't say freaking out in
Yeah.
1920s. How did I double check myself on that? Actually, it wasn't as hard. I think this comes from my journalism background. I always knew when I was about to slip into something, and I just check it on one of the websites as when it originated. And then I say, yeah, I can use that, or no, we can't use that. So that was one thing that, and you have to do that a lot. It's really, it can pull the reader, whether they know the time period, whether they're experts or not, something like that can pull them out of the story.
Yeah. So like my copy editor wanted me to use the term serial killer, but I couldn't because that wasn't in vernacular until the 1970s.
That's right.
So, yeah.
I watched that on Netflix.
I said, no, I said, that's not. But there are also like so many fantastic terms that we don't use today, which we should use today.
Yeah.
At one point, Lou's like at a club. At one point, she excuses herself by saying, "Oh, I have to iron my shoelaces," which is just a fun way of saying she has to go to the bathroom. I love it. What else is there? There's also cash or check, kids now or later. Then you can say cash, which means now, check, which is later, or bank's closed, which means just F off.
Yeah.
There's bearcat.
I love the one bourgeois, and I love that. You know, I use that. But what I did in my story, as you know, just to help differentiate characters, was that I give one character a phrase that they would use, and then another character would use. But so just so long as the phrases were in character. And so I didn't have a crossover of, you know, if somebody said bourgeois, not somebody else wouldn't say it too.
Yeah.
They go for the real deal.
And when I was like, what I kind of tried to do was like, Lou is detective on this case, her detective, I guess, yes, is like this tall, white, handsome Brit. So he doesn't usually get like all the vernacular. So like if he uses something, then he'll be like, what? And then she'll be like, oh, it means this. And so that's how I've been doing it, which sometimes is heavy-handed, but other times it works out, I think.
Yeah. We're closing in on the last few minutes, and I think we've answered the questions, but I want to give you another opportunity here to really talk about your book. Your book is available wherever books are sold.
But especially at Belmont Books. Especially
at Belmont Books. That's right. That's the place to go. You're also check out your New York Times. I think if people go to your website, could you say your, I guess we could put it in the chat as well. Your website, so they can check out your New York Times. You have a link to your New York Times article there. And also you've been hitting some fabulous, fun, buzzy lists that are always exciting. And I'm sure those are captured there as well. This is a book that people need to grab. They need to dig in because it's going to be around these characters. This city, you're going to learn more and more about these people, their crime-solving ways, and also about the African-American community in the 1920s in New York. And from a perspective that I think is fun, challenging, and is not going to leave any, let me have a cliche here, stone unturned.
I mean, I think it's good. I might be biased. The New York Times also thinks it's good. So there's that.
Right. So you're good to go. That's it. I say, hey, everybody, do we have any more questions? I don't see any more. Did I miss anything? And I'm just very glad everybody's here and was able to join us tonight. And this has been a lot of fun.
It's been a blast. It's always fun to have you host Denny and to celebrate your well. Thank you everyone for coming tonight. Both Denny and Nekesa's books are at Belmont, and I will reiterate that we have signed book plates for Dead Dead Girls. If you're joining us not locally, we do ship throughout the US. So if you're joining us from anywhere in the United States, we can ship both books, one book, any books you may want, to you, all books. Thank you so much. If any of you joined halfway through or missed anything, this is recorded, so it'll be up on our YouTube channel, Belmont Books, within 24 to 48 hours, so you can catch up on whatever you missed. But thank you to Denny and thank you to Nekesa. Congratulations on both your debuts. Nekesa, especially all of the wonderful write-ups you're getting. I look forward to your sophomore novels, both of you.
Thank you so much. Oh yes, me too. I'm sure it will be grand. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Of course, have a good night.